Well, the policy going forward says a student should be called.
Right, but there's two ways of taking that. You should do this, but that way that is spoken has the nuance of it's voluntary. Now, I personally, if somebody wants to call them, if Stevie wants to call himself Sandra, I don't have a problem with that. Have at it. If you think that you're no longer a boy and you want to think of yourself as a girl and dress as a girl, that's fine. And if your family and your friends wish to follow along in that, and I'm going to call it a fantasy, and I'll talk about that in a moment, have at it. Congratulations. Don't involve me. And that goes back to First Amendment rights of free association. The opposite of that is the freedom not to associate as well. This policy made it clear that you have to participate, and that's wrong. Now, my whole career has been as a software engineer and consultant. I originally started off with a degree in biology, and I actually did research at BU Medical School many years and unfortunately many pounds ago. Don't tell me that we have drifted from an absolute value society to one of relativism. This is the extreme of that, where if you think that you were a guy and now you want to be a girl, that you are one. You're not. I have enough knowledge to say, I'm sorry, at the chromosomal level, you're not. You can never change. You can have physical surgery one way or the other, but that doesn't make you what you tell others you are. There are just innate physical capabilities of one sex over the other. And that's not going to change unless parents start to use puberty blocking hormones. But that's another topic.
So I'm sorry, I just need to repeat
Sure.
that. Unless there are, you can have surgery, but it will, please complete that thought.
Yeah, you can have surgery, but you still are chromosomally what you were born with. This whole line about assigned at birth, there is no doctor, nurse, or clerk that's standing at the ready at the time of your birth with a pen and a checklist saying, oh, we're going to say you are a boy or you are a girl. I'm sorry, that was defined at conception, and you can't change that. And no amount of politically correct rhetoric or politically incorrect rhetoric is going to change that.
Yeah.
Because once you have hit puberty, there are differences that cannot be erased just from hormone therapy later on in life. A guy is always going to have a larger heart, greater lung capacity, greater oxygen capability, carrying capability, a difference in fast twitch and slow twitch musculature. Their bone density is always going to be different, even years later of having undergone fairly recent hormone strategies. And we're seeing that now starting to kick back.
How so?
Well, more and more in the blogosphere, I'm seeing stories of men basically taking over women's sports. You might as well toss Title IX right out the door. But now I'm drifting apart or away from my main thesis. Or my main beef with this is that it's bad governmental policy.
But the SB 263 was broad anti-discrimination law. telling school boards that they had to develop policies to,
No, you're wrong. They said they had to create a comprehensive plan on how they would deal with each of those several different protected classes. What Guilford has done, because of one family, the Maxwells, who have outed themselves and their second grade child.
I have to ask you also to, afford the same, respect to me in my questions that I do in your answers.
Oh, sure,
And my
that's fine.
statement was, the policy, they are under, and I'm paraphrasing, but they're under a directive to come up with a broad anti-discrimination policy for a lot of categories that also includes transgender individuals.
You are correct. That
So-
SB 263 added gender identity to that list of protected classes. Absolutely correct.
So then, you were then explaining what's your problem with, JBAB?
When does a state statute or a policy at the local level outweigh an enumerated constitutional right? Not only in the US Constitution, but several articles of the New Hampshire Constitution, including the right to conscience, the right to free speech. There are several others as well, and I have written about that on Granite Rock a number of times. And this is part and parcel of, is this the proper role of government, in this case at the local level, to ignore the more foundational law?
What it seems is, that school boards really feel under the gun to put policies in place to avoid potential lawsuits. Guilford's not the only one who's following the directive of the New Hampshire School Board Association. So what would you have done? What would you have changed here?
First off, the SAUs are under no, what's the word I'm looking for? They do not have to adopt, as written, any New Hampshire School Board principle or policy. This is one reason as a budget committee member in Guilford, I've been trying to get their dues taken out of the budget because they don't follow the law. They act as their own lobbying environment and sometimes against that of parents. But that's yet another topic wrong with this.
And I'm sorry, that's the School Board Association you're talking about. Okay.
NSSBA, NHSBA, correct. SAU should be, just because they're handed a policy doesn't mean they shouldn't be doing their own homework to say, is this constitutionally correct? Unfortunately, we've gotten to the point in society where, well, we'll let the judiciary worry about that, and that's a wrong-headed idea. If we are sovereign citizens, and I don't mean the sovereign citizen movement, but if we are the sovereign citizens to which government is supposed to serve, we all need to be looking at things and saying, is this correct? Unfortunately, apathy and a lack of education in this area has done us in.
So is your desire then for Guilford and other local school districts to examine this individually, and look at what the School Board Association is recommending, but then decide on their own way of own
Well,
non-discrimination policy?
You brought up the idea of lawsuits to avoid them. Lawsuits can happen from both sides of this question. And to be honest, in some ways the school boards are in a tough situation. You know, it's like Solomon deciding to cut the baby in half. My take is, unfortunately, depending on who you are, constitutional rights, enumerated ones, take precedence over local policy.
What is your feeling about what this policy would potentially mean for girls' sports?
Croc TV.